Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Landale in a galaxy far, far away. No, stop it. This is too nerdy. I don't like it. Science fiction and fantasy are two very different mediums that often get slammed together for all the wrong reasons. Sci-fi is fantastical but often has a framing of facts and science behind it, whereas fantasy is just fantastical with much less stringent rules. But these two separate forms of fiction are often slammed together into the same category. I don't like it. Sci-fi and fantasy are their own things. Don't slam them together all willy-nilly. It's like mixing chocolate and pepperoni. They are their own thing. They should be enjoyed on their own. But sometimes, instead of chocolate and pepperoni, you get chocolate and peanut butter. When sci-fi and fantasy are actually paired together and can play off of each other's strengths, you can get something truly fantastic. The revelation during Shining Force that the Ancients had immensely powerful future technology was a cool and fun reveal. The melding of space travel with Wild West themes made Star Wars a unique experience. And combining traditional swords and sorcery in an age of cyborgs and world-controlling supercomputers makes the Phantasy Star series one of my favorite pairings of these two genres. Phantasy Star IV is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. It often clashes with Shining Force 2 as my absolute favorite game of all time. It's just got all of the things that I like rolled up into a single, solitary package. The story it tells, the world building, and the characters make for a solid narrative, one that wraps up the series with a bow. Its combat is turn-based but also fast and engaging. Whether you are annihilating simple sandworms or desperately fighting to survive against techno-wizards, battles are incredible. Quests, the music, the comic book-inspired art, everything about this game makes me happy. Or at least it did when I was younger. I have not played this game in about a decade or more, and nostalgia has a real easy time vaselining over memories. So I'm gonna replay it and give it a critical shakedown. I've gotten a bit better at using critical thinking to batter things I like until I don't like them anymore, so this is either going to be incredibly fun or just absolutely abysmal. Join me in further erasing more fun things from my life. For RPG Fortress, I'm Richard, and this is... May the Phantasy Star IV be with you? Oh no! Phantasy Star: The End of the Millennium was developed and published by Sega for the Mega Drive in 1993, with the title reaching English-speaking territories in 1995 as Phantasy Star IV. The game is the third and final Phantasy Star game for the Mega Drive/Genesis. A lot of staff members from the first two Phantasy Star titles returned to work on this game. I first got my hands on this game back in the day from Woolco in 1995 for $98.99 Canadian. I was like 13 years old, and seeing it behind the glass after reading about it for years was the happiest day of my life. I hoodwinked my mom into getting it for me for an Easter gift, as Easter was one of the 4 times a year where I got a new game. As an idiot child in the early 90s, the only place I got game news from was actual game magazines, as the internet was not really a thing yet. And I was absolutely glued to previews of Phantasy Star IV. I had loved PS2 as one of my first Genesis RPGs, and this looked like the logical leap forward for the series, as PS3 was one of my first game disappointments. Like, Phantasy Star IV walked into the room, and Phantasy Star III showed itself to the exit. Just kidding, Phantasy Star III gets a bad rap. It's a solid 5 out of 10. You'll find that Phantasy Star IV is a lot like Phantasy Star II, just with a much nicer coat of paint and a lot of quality of life improvements. There were early plans for PS4 to return to the first-person dungeon view like the OG Phantasy Star, but they ended up sticking with the overhead dungeons that were first started in PS2, and I prefer that anyway, so let's go. The story of Phantasy Star IV is solid. It needs to tell a story, but it also needs to close out a franchise. It needs to both be interesting for new players and to close the story for old fans, and it does both. The opening of Phantasy Star IV perfectly encapsulates where the overall story is series-wise, but explains it so that a newbie can jump right in. Before you press start, you bear witness to one of the coolest text scrolls I have ever seen in any media. An enigmatic prophecy explains how in aeons past, two sides fought against each other in a massive battle, climaxing when the victor vanquished the loser. 4 bells tolled, 4 torches were lit, and life continued for millennia. After this vague but enticing recap of ancient events, we get some scenes explaining where we are in the present day. This is the Algo star system. This is the place where Phantasy Stars 1 through 4 all take place. Over the millennia, this system goes through a lot of shit. The second part of the text crawl discusses the events of Phantasy Star II, but in a way that doesn't completely spoil what happens in that game. You start the game as Alyss and Chaz, 2 hunters that work at the Hunter Guild in Ido on Motavia in the Algo star system. The Hunters Guild is basically a group of 4 higher swords who are contracted to do all sorts of tasks for the populace. They fight monsters, rescue lost citizens, and feed shortcake to dogs. They are basically 1 part mercenary and 1 part DoorDash. Chaz and Alyss have been hired by the Academy in the town of Paseo to investigate the town's happenings. Something is lurking under the Academy, and it's definitely not rats. Starting the game with just the right amount of ancient history, series continuity, world building, and mystery is the perfect way to draw in new players and satisfy old school fans alike. During the game's 40-ish hours of runtime, the story will escalate to one of grand proportions. Not only are the threads of this game all tied up, but the plot threads of the previous games are also satisfied. The word epic is thrown around a lot, but the story of Phantasy Star IV is truly epic. The events and resolutions in this game are truly memorable. The world building in Phantasy Star IV is probably the best of that era of games. Algo, the planets, the biology of monsters, the futurism, they're all threads of this huge tapestry that is Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star IV has all of these little connections to the previous games, tying them all together. Nostalgia can be hard to get right, but Phantasy Star IV does it correctly. It gives satisfying nods to past characters and events and works them into the story. This isn't shoehorning Darth Vader into every single Star Wars thing just because they need fans to metaphorically suck their metaphorical dicks. Hey, how about them characters? Who you playing as? Well, Phantasy Star IV has a fun cast of characters, all with their own reasons for joining your party. You can have up to 5 characters in your party at one time, and they all contribute something to combat, and they're all interesting. Alyss, your party leader for the first part of the game, a brusque and headstrong hunter who uses slicers to destroy groups of enemies at a time. Give her 2 slicers and see entire screens of enemies get sliced into ribbons. Chaz, your party leader for the majority of the game, disciple of Alyss, competent swordsman, and very green. Good damage dealer, can consistently lay damage down on a singular or multiple targets, and learn some okay healing spells. You can give him 2 knives or a knife and a shield, but don't fool yourself, give him a sword. Rika, an agile fighter / healer who wields claws during battle. Rika is what is known as a Newman, a cross between Paulman and a bio-monster. She's fast, does decent damage, and can heal. Plus, she's got a killer design. Awesome character. Ren, cannon shooting, damage tanking, data talking, android. Ren is responsible for looking after the satellites in orbit of Motavia. He's got a lot of HP and great defense, so you want to stick him in the front of your party. Characters in the front of the party are attacked more often than the characters in the back of the party. Also of note that this isn't the Ren of Phantasy Star III, even though he looks very similar. Both of these characters are Ren-type androids and simply go by the name Ren. Rune, suave and shit-talking Esper wizard. Rune's got a host of both techniques and skills at his disposal that are incredible. He's also a saucy jackass that has one hell of a theme song. Han, a dork. Grizz, a native Motavian. This means he's blue and furry with bug eyes and a bird's beak. Very, very unique species design. This guy's out to fight the black magician Zio. Thematically, he's great, but in combat, he can really only just swing his axe, so he's not great to bring along. Raja, a native Dazolician. This means he's green and kinda lizard-like, but not really. With him in your party, he rounds out the three main races of Algo. He's a sarcastic and wisecracking old priest. He does have some incredible healing magic though, so he's a great party member. Demi, cute android girl. Kyra. Kyra is a young Esper wizard who can use slicers. She's fun and bubbly, but her contributions to the party and the story are not great. Seth. Oh no. Gameplay of Phantasy Star IV is, for the most part, going to be pretty familiar. Being a 16-bit JRPG, you can expect all kinds of stuff like talking to NPCs in towns, buying new weapons and armor from shops, a world map with random battles, turn-based combat, big bosses, experience-based leveling up, etc, etc, etc. Combat is f***ing tidy, mate. Yes, you have a 5-member team, which sounds like it will slow down combat, but the combat is just so smooth and streamlined. Even big spells are nice and quick without sacrificing artistic integrity. The quote-unquote magic system in Phantasy Star IV is great. You have both techniques and skills. The difference is that techniques use technique points and skills use Vancian spell slots. There is a lot of versatility, and for the most part, characters have a lot of diversity leading to some nice replayability. Combat is made even quicker with the macro system. You are able to set up macros before battles, choosing who does what in combat, so once you enter combat, just choose your macro and unload on your opponents. Even a simple macro of getting everyone to attack can help speed up your way through random mobs. Phantasy Star IV also has combination attacks to just absolutely obliterate the competition. There's over a dozen combination attacks in the game, and some can be conjured up with different techs and skills. Take, for example, Blizzard. You can summon this icy attack with any Watt, aka Ice spell, and any Zan, aka Wind spell. So you can use any combo of Watt, Gi-Watt, Na-Watt, and Zan, Gi-Zan, and Na-Zan. And the stronger the individual spell is, the stronger the combo is going to be. So if you use Na-Watt and Na-Zan, the resulting Blizzard is going to hit very hard. Also, I'm not sure what RPG was the first to feature combo attacks, but Phantasy Star IV beat out Chrono Trigger by 2 years. Similarly, the game also includes several combination enemies. Sometimes enemies will combine to create much more powerful foes. Pray to your god if you encounter a life deleter at a low level. Phantasy Star II is infamous for how hard its dungeons were, featuring the mechanic boss from the last dungeon is a standard enemy in the next one. And while Phantasy Star IV requires a bit of over-preparing for an occasional boss or dungeon, it's generally a much more manageable experience. I love the grind in Phantasy Star II, but not everyone does. Phantasy Star IV is definitely what I would refer to as playable, or also known as fun. Hey, let's talk about the game world and getting around it. The star system of Algo in the time of Phantasy Star IV has a number of places to visit. Most notably, you will be spending most of your time on Motavia and Dezolis, but you will also occasionally visit a couple of orbiting satellites and other fun surprises in the skies around the Phantasy Star. You start out on Motavia, which was originally a desert planet in the OG Phantasy Star, but was terraformed into a green planet by Mother Brain in Phantasy Star II. But when Mother Brain was destroyed, Motavia started to slide back into its original desert state. So the world of Motavia in PS4 is in a transient state where a lot of it is desert, but some areas are lush and green, but with arid deserts slowly swallowing them. Now this is absolute cinema. When I said that the planets are recurring characters in this series, this is exactly what I meant. You will eventually get a fucking starship, and you'll be able to visit Dezolis. Dezolis is a hostile planet stuck in perpetual winter. Dezolis has a lot of ice walls blocking progress that can only be bypassed once you get the Ice Digger. The Ice Digger is one of 3 vehicles in the game. These vehicles will help you bypass obstacles in the world to get you to places where you need to go to continue the story, but they can also be used to access hidden areas. The first vehicle is the Land Rover, which is used to get past dunes on Motavia. The second vehicle is the Ice Digger, which, as mentioned, destroys ice blocks on Dezolis. And the final vehicle is the Hydrofoil, which allows you to travel over bodies of water on Motavia. Something else that I love in PS4 is that there is a lot of supplemental actual dialogue. You can actually search a lot of stuff in the background in towns. Searching stuff like wardrobes, sinks, and counters will get you a lot of silly quips, usually from Chaz. There's even references to Sonic the Hedgehog and the Game Gear. Fun and silly stuff like this does a great job of endearing me to a game. Uh-oh, here comes quest discourse. Hey, it's Richard from RPG Fortress talking about quests again. Yes, this is a beaten horse by now, but Phantasy Star IV does quests the right way. This was an era before World of Warcraft. This was an era before Trails in the Sky. This was an era before Xenoblade Chronicles. Phantasy Star's quests are truly of a different time. Phantasy Star IV has 8 quests. 8 of them. When you get to the Hunters Guild, the person at the job board will show you what is available. The quests pop up as you move on through the game's narrative, and it is very possible to miss out on them, so you'll want to go back and check the board often. What makes Phantasy Star IV's quests great is that they are unique. There are only 8 of them. A lot of modern games will have just fucking reams of quests, and it's all the same shit, just find 5 fire crystals, kill 10 dire rats, get 15 iron ores, just over and over again. Phantasy Star IV's quests are: kill the massive sandworm terrorizing a sandworm ranch, find a lost dog and feed him a shortcake, find a missing student indoctrinated by space goths, find a massive slug underground, give a child a replica of Alice Landale's sword, kill the Rappy King, and enter a massive cybernetic dungeon and kill the rogue AI within. That's it. Yes, finding a lost dog and feeding him shortcake is a very, very silly quest, but you only have to do it once. Plus, you are feeding a cute dog a shortcake. That's pretty cool, as silly as it is. The point is, less is more, and I would rather have, oh no, 8 quests are too few, compared to 100 quests where half of them are kill 15 things or get 15 things. Also, there are a handful of optional dungeons, including one that ties Black Sheep of the series Phantasy Star III to the rest of the games. Very cool. This game also looks great. The Genesis isn't known for its super vibrant palette, so when it pulls off a game that is really saturated and colorful, you tend to remember it. I'm looking at you, Wonder Boy and Monster World, Aladdin, and of course, Phantasy Star IV. The series has a unique graphical style, which involves tall, slender sprites compared to the squat, super deformed standards of the day, the combination of swords and sorcery with sci-fi, and unique aliens like native Motavians and Dazolicians. PS4 is very colorful. These colors burst with intensity. Forests are lush, towns are vibrant, and monsters pop right out at you. And on top of these beautiful colors, the towns, dungeons, and overworld are all really well put together. Wherever you are exploring, you are going to be having fun, even in grimy caves. But the piece de la résistance in Phantasy Star IV is the cutscenes. The story segments in this game are told with these comic book style panels that are unlike anything in any of the previous games. These are big, bold, beautiful panels with amazing pixel art. These still look incredible even by today's standards. In a time before animated cutscenes, and a time before FMV, and a time before voice acting, these cutscenes were an incredible sight to behold. I also want to shout out the music in this game because this soundtrack is hands down my favorite OST of any game ever. First off, the soundtrack is massive. In an age where a lot of these game soundtracks had maybe a dozen tracks, this game had 48 tracks. This is a massive mega amount of songs for a single game in 1993. PS4 soundtrack was jointly written by Izuho Takeuchi and Masaki Nakagaki. Haven't heard of them? I'm not surprised, as their contributions to games are few, and those that are there are eclectic. Izuho, also sometimes known as Ippo, has 26 credits on 18 games according to Moby Games. Most of these credits are for sound effects and sound programming. She also did the voice of Alex Kidd on Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle. She's only done 6 or 7 game soundtracks, but 3 of those are Phantasy Star III, Phantasy Star IV, and Dark Wizards, so she's basically batting at 100%. You will find Masaki Nakagaki has contributed even less to video games. In fact, they have barely touched the world of video games at all. Moby shows them with 3 gaming credits, and only 1 as a composer, and that credit is Phantasy Star IV. So you're right in asking, Richard, are you seriously telling us your all-time favorite video game soundtrack was done by essentially nobodies? I mean, yes, the soundtrack is just as utterly astounding, and it was written by two composers that barely anyone will have heard of. This soundtrack is full to the brim with intense electronica, like these big, aggressive melodic tracks that are so utterly unique in the world of RPGs. These almost feel like tracks from a shmup OST, but due to the unique futuristic space cybernetic game world, these songs fit incredibly well. Tracks like Organic Beat pulse with this otherworldly drive that is perfect for exploring derelict underground labs full of biomonsters. Laughter is a sinister and imposing composition that makes you feel like the black blood of outer space is rotting you from the inside out. Ooze is a frenetic and mind-destroying final boss theme that makes you feel like the entirety of the cosmos is crashing down around your disembodied soul. The game also has a host of very cheery town themes, multiple chipper shop themes, and multiple overworld themes, as there are multiple overworlds. The battle themes get you suitably pumped up to punch biomonsters and robots in the face, and there are a wide array of tracks for the various cutscenes. Another fun thing is that Ippo has remixed a number of Bo's dungeon themes from the first Phantasy Star, and they sound just incredible. I don't do this often, but here are a couple of snippets from my favorite tracks. Now, I want to think that I have been pretty open-minded about talking about this game. Yes, it is very, very obvious that there is a lot of nostalgia swirling around in my brain for this game. I won't deny that fact. What I am hoping to do now is to discuss whether this game is a good fit for new or young players. Because people who are playing this for the first time in 2025 are going to have a much different time than I did back in the 90s. I think Phantasy Star IV is very easy to pick up and play. Movement, combat, story progression is all pretty straightforward. You press up, you move up. You attack a biomonster, it dies. You read a dialogue, you continue the story. It is very new player friendly. There are a few things that can trip you up if you dive right in though. This game has its own lexicon for techniques, and there is no in-game explanations. Watt is a water tech. Foy is a fire tech. Thu is a thunder tech. It almost sounds like some of these techniques are shorthand, but then you get to stuff like Tandle, a lightning skill, Telele, a defense skill, Ithes, a light skill. I've played this game at least a dozen times, and I still get confused on some of these techs and skills. A newbie will definitely get tripped up and will need a guide or a pen and paper and some solid guesstimation. Now, for 1995, Phantasy Star IV has a pretty decent localization. There's nothing too egregious about the English script, but a few things definitely stand out. Between these 4 games, the translators had a real hard time keeping some things consistently named, most notably Algo and the Planets. In PS1, it was Algol, Motavia, Dazores, and Palma. In PS2, it was Algo, Mota, Dizo, and Palm. PS3 is irrelevant because it happens outside of Algo and its planets. And in PS4, it is Algo, Motavia, Dazolis, and Parma. So yes, that is some S++ grade English going on right there. Now, if you are jumping straight into PS4 as a newbie, never touching those earlier games, you won't have too much to worry about. PS4 can be self-contained, but if you are looking to expand outwards afterwards, just be ready for some absolute localization nightmares. Dark Phallus, are you kidding me? Some of the callbacks might leave newbies a little bit cold. Like I have said several times, you can play PS4 without having played the other games, and you will still have a hell of a time. Even a lot of the callbacks and nostalgia segments aren't so dense that you will get lost. But there are a few segments that might leave newbies a little bit bewildered. But that's really it. Other than a few issues, PS4 can be appreciated by new players. And it really should be. A lot of games from the time period regularly outshine PS4. Your Chrono Triggers, your Final Fantasy VIs, and even Sega's very own Shining Force. These games are always being touted as the best of this generation, but I truly think that Phantasy Star IV belongs in the same category as these other titles. Phantasy Star IV is a phenomenal game in a truly underappreciated series. The world building, setting, and mythos are absolutely astounding. It harkens back to the previous games in a way that will satisfy longtime fans, but it is also friendly and inviting to new players. This game's story is massive and engrossing, but it also feels like it deserves to be massive and engrossing. Gameplay is a great time with rewarding combat, incredible dungeons, and multiple worlds to explore. The game is smooth and snappy. Enemies are well balanced, so finding new gear or learning a new technique or skill will be a literal game changer. Bosses are big, beautiful, ugly things that will challenge you without being too hard, except Dielmlars, fuck those guys. Character designs are an incredible mix of fantasy and sci-fi. Mages and androids side by side battling horrid bio-monsters and ancient AIs, unsealed from dormant computer systems from when an invading race of aliens were attempting to take over the star system after destroying their own. The personification of malice lying dormant and returning every 1,000 years. Just spine-chilling. It's obvious that I love this game and that the nostalgia is thick inside my brain. But after watching this video and listening to my thoughts on this game, I hope you will understand that I truly believe what I am saying. Phantasy Star IV is incredible. Thank you for watching. I'm Richard for RPG Fortress. See you next time, and don't forget to hug a muskcat. Goodbye.